Well, hello, good evening, good people. We are on chapter, I think, 42. Yes, 42 of the Aquarian, and I don't know exactly how much we're going to read tonight, but let's just get started. Closing our eyes, taking a deep breath in, feeling present in our bodies in this moment of time and space. Letting go of the busyness of the day, letting go of the anticipation of the week to come. Just feel yourself present and focused in this moment. Deep breath in and out. There is nothing that has been left behind, and we are here now by a divine appointment. Our right and perfect place at the right and perfect time, doing the right and perfect thing. Breathe. And just feel the body and mind begin to settle around the idea of a radiant, peaceful, and powerful divine spark of life within. Everything around it resonating at that same highest level. Anything that does not vibrate at the highest level now falls away. Each breath fanning that flame that we are growing bigger and stronger in our divine creative light. And feel our hearts opening, our mind expanding. And when you're ready, gently open your eyes. All right. So let us begin chapter 42. In Persia, Jesus' work was done, and he resumed his journey towards his native land. The Persian sage went with him to the Euphrates. Then, with a pledge that they would meet again in Egypt land, the master said, "Farewell." As Caspar went his way unto his home beside the Caspian Sea, and Jesus soon was in Chaldea, cradle land of Israel. In where Abraham was born, he tarried for a time, and when he told the people who he was and why he came, they came from near and far to speak to him. He said to them, "We are all kin. 2,000 years or more ago, our father Abraham lived here in and then he worshipped God the One, and taught the people in these sacred groves. And he was greatly blessed, becoming father of the mighty hosts of Israel. Although so many years have passed since Abraham and Sarah walked these ways, a remnant of their kindred still abide in And in their hearts the God of Abraham is still adored, and faith and justice are the rocks on which they build. Behold this land. It is no more fruitful land than Abraham loved so well. The rains come not as in the former times, the vine is not productive now, and withered are the figs. But this shall not forever be. The time will come when all your deserts will rejoice, when flowers will bloom, when all your vines will bend their heads with luscious fruit. Your shepherds will again be glad." And Jesus preached to them the gospel of goodwill and peace on earth, and he told them of the brotherhood of life and of the inborn powers of man and of the kingdom of the soul. And as he spoke, Ashbina, greatest sage of all Assyria, stood before his face. The people knew this sage, for he had often taught them in their sacred halls and groves, and they rejoiced to see his face. Ashbina said, "My children of Chaldea, hear, behold, for you are greatly blessed today, because a prophet of the living God has come to you. Take heed to what this master says, for he gives forth the words that God has given him." And Jesus and the sage went through the towns and cities of Chaldea and the lands between the Tigris and the Euphrates. And Jesus healed the multitude of people who were sick. The ruined Babylon was near, and Jesus and the sage went through her gates and walked among her fallen palaces. They trod the streets where Israel was once held in base captivity. They saw where Judah's sons and daughters hung their harps upon the willows and refused to sing. They saw where Daniel and the Hebrew children stood as living witnesses of faith. And Jesus lifted up his hands and said, "Behold the grandeur of the works of man. The king of Babylon destroyed the temple of the Lord in old Jerusalem. He burned the holy city, bound in chains my people and my kin, and brought them here as slaves. But retribution comes, for whatsoever man shall do to other men, the righteous judge will do to them. The son of Babylon has gone down. The songs of pleasure will be heard no more within her walls. And every kind of creeping thing and unclean bird will, in these ruins, find their homes." And in the temple bellis, Jesus and Ashbina stood in silent thought. Then Jesus spoke and said, "Behold this monument of folly and of shame. Man tried to shake the very throne of God, and he essayed to build a tower to reach heaven, when lo, his very speech was snatched away because of his lofty words he boasted in his power. And on these heights the heathen Baal stood, the god wrought out by hands of men. Upon yon altar birds and beasts and men, yea, children have been burned in awful sacrifice to Baal. And now the gory priests are dead. The very rocks have shuddered and fallen down, and the place is desolate. Now, in the plains of Shinar, Jesus tarried yet for 7 days, and with Ashbina meditated long upon the needs of men, and how the sages could best serve the coming age. When Jesus went his way, and after many days he crossed the Jordan to his native land, at once he sought his home in Nazareth. His mother's heart was filled with joy. She made a feast for him, invited all her kindred and her friends. But Jesus' brothers were not pleased that such attention should be paid to one they deemed a sheer adventurer, and they went not unto the feast. They laughed their brother's claims to scorn. They called him indolent, ambitious, vain, a worthless fortune hunter, searcher of the world of fame, who, after many years, returns to mother's home with neither gold nor any wealth. And Jesus called aside his mother and his sister Miriam, and told them of his journey to the east. He told them of the lessons he had learned and of the works he had done. To others he told not the story of his life. Oh, here's that moment, right? Where do we continue on, or do we let that be? All right, we're just going to read about Greece. We got a few more minutes. The Greek philosophy was full of pungent truth, and Jesus longed to study with the masters in the schools of Greece. And so he left his home in Nazareth and crossed the Carmel hills, and at the port took ship, and soon was in the Grecian capital. Now the Athenians had heard of him as a teacher and philosopher, and they were glad to have him come to them, that they might hear his words of truth. Among the masters of the Greeks was one, Apollo, who was called defender of the oracle and recognized as many lands as the Grecian sage. Apollo opened up for Jesus all the doors of Grecian lore, and in the Areopagus he heard the wisest masters speak. But Jesus brought to them a wisdom greater far than theirs, and so he taught. Once in the amphitheater he stood, and when Apollo bade him speak, he said, "Athenian masters, hear. In ages long ago, men, wise in nature's laws, sought out and found a place in which your city stands. Full well you know that there are parts of earth where its great beating heart throws heavenward etheric waves that meet the ethers from above, where spirit light and understanding and the stars of night shine forth. Of all the parts of earth there is no place more sensitized, more truly spirit blessed than that where Athens stands. Yet all of Greece is blessed. Yea, all of Greece is blessed. No other land has been the homeland of such mighty men of thought as grace your scrolls of fame. A host of sturdy giants of philosophy, of poetry, of science, of art were born upon the soil of Greece, and rocked to manhood in your cradle of pure thought. I am not come here to speak of science, of philosophy, or art. Of these you are the world's best masters now. But all your high accomplishments are but stepping stones to the worlds beyond the realm of sense, are but elusive shadows flitting on the walls of time. But I would tell you of a life beyond, within, a real life that cannot pass away. In science and philosophy, there is no power strong enough to fit a soul to recognize itself or to commune with God. I would not stay the flow of your great streams of thought, but I would turn them to the channels of the soul. Unaided by the spirit breath, the work of intellection tends to solve the problems of the things we see and nothing more. The senses were ordained to bring into the mind mere pictures of the things that pass away. They do not deal with real things. They do not comprehend eternal law. But man is something in his soul, a something that will tear the veil apart in which he may see the world of real things. We call this something spirit consciousness. It sleeps in every soul and cannot be awakened until the holy breath becomes a welcome guest. This holy breath knocks at the door of every soul, but cannot enter until the will of man throws wide the door. There is no power in intellect to turn the key. Philosophy and science both have toiled to get a glimpse behind the veil, but they have failed. The secret spring that throws ajar the door of soul is touched by nothing else than purity in life, by prayer and holy thought. Return, O mystic stream of Grecian thought, and mingle your clear waters with the flood of spirit life. And then the spirit consciousness will sleep no more, and man will know, and God will bless. When Jesus had thus said, he stepped aside. The Grecian masters were astonished at the wisdom of his words. They answered not. For many days the Grecian masters listened to the clear, incisive words that Jesus spoke. And while they could not fully comprehend the things he said, they were delighted and accepted his philosophy. One day, as Jesus and Apollo walked beside the sea, a Delphic courier came in haste and said, "Apollo, Master, come, the oracle would speak with you." Apollo said to Jesus, "Sir, if you would see the Delphic oracle, hear it speak, you may accompany me." And Jesus did accompany him. The masters went in haste, and when they came to Delphi, great excitement reigned. And when Apollo stood before the oracle, it spoke and said, "Apollo, sage of Greece, the bell strikes 12. The midnight of the ages now has come. Within the tomb of nature ages are conceived. They gestate and are born in glory in the rising sun. And when the aged sun goes down, the age disintegrates and dies. The Delphic age has been an age of glory and renown. The gods have spoken to the sons of men through oracles of wood and gold and precious stone. The Delphic sun has set. The oracle will go into decline. The time is near when men will hear its voice no more. The gods will speak to man by man. The living oracle now stands within these sacred groves. The Logos from on high has come. From henceforth will decrease my wisdom and my power. From henceforth will increase the wisdom and the power of him, Emmanuel. Let all the masters say, let every creature hear and honor him, Emmanuel. And then the oracle spoke, not again for 40 days, and priests and people were amazed. They came near and far to hear the living oracle speak forth the wisdom of the gods. And Jesus and the Grecian sage returned, and in Apollo's home the living oracle spoke forth for 40 days. One day Apollo said to Jesus as they sat alone, "This sacred Delphic oracle has spoken many a helpful word for Greece. Pray, tell me, what is it that speaks? Is it an angel, man, or living God?" And Jesus said, "It is not angel, man, nor God that speaks. It is the matchless wisdom of the masterminds of Greece united in a master mind. This giant mind has taken to itself the substances of soul and thinks and hears and speaks. It will remain a living soul while masterminds feed it with thought, with wisdom, and with faith and hope. When the masterminds of Greece shall perish from the land, this giant mastermind will cease to be, and then the Delphic oracle will speak no more." It was a holy day, and Jesus walked upon the Athens beach. A storm was on, and ships were being tossed about like toys upon the bosom of the sea. The sailors and the fishermen were going down to watery graves, and the shores were strewn with bodies of the dead. And Jesus halted not, but with a mighty power he rescued many a helpless one, and often bringing back to life the seeming dead. Now, on these shores were altars sacred to the gods supposed to rule the seas. And men and women, heedless of the cries of drowning men, were crowding all these altars, calling on their gods for help. At length the storm was done, and all the sea was calm, and men could think again. And Jesus said, "You worshippers of wooden gods, how has the fury of this storm been lessened by your frantic prayers? Where is the strength of these poor, weather-beaten gods with painted swords and crowns? A God that could abide in such a little house could hardly hold a frantic fly, and who could hope that he could hold at bay the lords of the winds and waves? The mighty powers of the worlds unseen do not give forth their help till men have done their best. They only help when men can do no more. And you have agonized and prayed around these shrines and let men sink to death who might have been, by your assistance, saved. The God that saves dwells in your souls and manifests by making use of your own feet and legs and arms and hands. Strength never comes through idleness, nor through awaiting or another one to bear your loads or do the work that you were called to do. But when you do your best to bear your loads and do your work, you offer unto God a sacrifice well-pleasing in his sight. And then the Holy One breathes deep upon your glowing sacrificial coals and makes them ablaze aloft to fill your souls with light and strength and helpfulness. The most efficient prayer that men can offer to a God of any kind is helpfulness to those in need of help. For what you do for another man, the Holy One will do for you. And thus God helps. His work in Greece was done, and Jesus must go on his way to Egypt in the south. Apollo, with the highest masters of the land and many people from the varied walks of life, stood on the shore to see the Hebrew sage depart. And Jesus said, "The Son of Man has been in many lands, has stood in temples of the multitude of foreign gods, has preached the gospel of goodwill and peace on earth to many people, tribes, and tongues. He has been received with favor in a multitude of homes, but Greece is, of them all, the royal host. The breadth of Grecian thought, the depth of her philosophy, the height of her unselfish aspirations have well fitted her to be the champion of the cause of human liberty and right. The fates of war have subjugated Greece because she trusted in the strength of flesh and bone and intellect, forgetful of the spirit life that binds the nation to its source of power. But Greece will not forever sit within the darkness of the shadowland as vassal of a foreign king. Lift up your heads, you men of Greece. The time will come when Greece will breathe the ethers of the holy breath and be a mainspring of the spirit power of earth. But God must be your shield, your buckler, and your tower of strength." And then he said, "Farewell." Apollo raised his hand in silent benediction, and the people wept. Upon the Cretan vessel Mars, the Hebrew sage sailed from the Grecian port. Some words, yeah. So Jesus is now he's made his way east, right? He's gone as far east as he can, in China, Tibet, Lhasa, and now he's coming back, right? Going back to Israel. Wow, there's just so... For as many times as I've read this, I think this section, I'm conscious of the fact that it has escaped me before, and it's starting to come over me in waves. But yeah, I'm becoming more aware in this reading of just how much preparation there was of all of the sages prior to what is coming. They each, as Jesus made his way east and then back again, have spent their time with him and are asking the questions, what does the coming age need, right? And here, by the time we get to Greece, even the Oracle at Delphi, the famed Oracle at Delphi, recognizes that its time is over and the time for the Christ to ascend is now upon them. I love that, when Jesus comes back to his home in Nazareth after having been, when he's first arrived, his brothers, which we realize he has brothers, right? That's a concept that's generally not taught if you're only aware of standard Christian theology. We don't seem to put it together that the books of James and John, like 1 John, 2nd and 3rd John, are his brothers. But yeah, I love how he arrives and they're like, who the hell is this conquered hero? He didn't come back with anything of note. He didn't bring back, chests of gold and invisible wealth. And it was to his mother and his sister Miriam that he told of his travels and experiences and of the healing work that he was doing. And I think it's important to recognize that he can share that with the feminine, the receptive, the intuitive, right? But the active, the male principle, is not recognizing his experiences, and they don't recognize his identity. I know we've heard before, prophet's not respected in his own land, so also true in your own home, right? Yeah, and then this reception and the praise of Delphi is simply beautiful. Like there is such love and respect in his words at Delphi, and just recognition of, I think, a mutual recognition of the office that the Oracle of Delphi holds, because for that Delphic age, that was the office of the Christ, and now it's recognized its place and is stepping aside for the new ascendant power that will speak to the hearts of men in the way they need to be spoken to. Rarely, I think, well, only in a situation of love, or one can say the work is well done, do we have such a beautiful and easy transition of power. The most recognizable and analogous thing I can think of would be the subtle changing of the hosts on PBS's NewsHour, as Jim Lehrer began to take a step back, and the other anchors, Judy Woodruff, Glenn Eiffel, they each took their turns at the desk, and it was such a seamless transition that you didn't notice that Jim wasn't there anymore. It's a very similar, loving transition here from Delphi to Jesus. I love, when he starts to talk to Greece, when he starts to talk to the people in Greece, he mentions that you are the home of thought, right? And science and philosophy, you are the greatest masters. But what you haven't brought with that is the heart. And for me and my reason for being interested in metaphysics, it's the wanting to understand and work with the energies behind the physical, behind the results that we see. Rather than being active and running after what I think might be the way to solve a problem or offer a solution, to step back and assess what is happening behind the scenes, whose results I'm seeing, feeling, and experiencing, and then ask the questions, what can I do to enhance, mitigate, control, or influence those behind the scenes machinations so that I have a different outcome. It's work all the same, right? But it is a more quiet and internal and maybe a spiritual task, whereas the going out and the doing, I need to go fix this thing, is certainly a more physical and active and mental, intellectual approach. And he says, no, the work of intellection tends to solve the problems of the things we can see. If we see that water's running, or if we see that water's on the floor, we're going to check the faucet to see where there's a leak. The metaphysician might be wondering what flow of emotions needs to happen or has been blocked, that created that event. Or what clearing can there be from this experience, or what have you. The work of intellection tends to solve the problems of the things we see and nothing more. In order to comprehend eternal law, we have to move into the heart. We have to move from the perspective of spirit. I don't know that anyone's ever really, sure, I'm certain that there have been times in the past where people have asked, who is the Oracle of Delphi and what is it? But I hadn't recalled that section before, and to get that answer that it is an elemental of the greatest minds, collectively coming together. But as they each pass away, then the Oracle will be no more. Yeah. If you notice that the Oracle spoke for 7 days, Jesus taught for not 7 days, 40 days. That number 40 in that spiritual sense, like we had, if you remember anything from the Old Testament, Moses was in the desert, No, Moses was in the desert for 40 years. 40 is the number. Let me just come back to that. That's what I'm trying to get to. 40 is the number of however long it takes, right? It's not necessarily 40 days. It's however long it takes for something to come to completion. Yeah. What else? There was really just so much here. Oh yeah. So the last little bit here, there was the storm, right? And people were drowning and people were dying, and it was trauma. It was traumatic, and it was a major devastating event. And he says, while you were off praying to a wooden, worthless idol, you could have been saving lives and by letting God work through you to save. So you were praying to a worthless statue when, if you had been active, God could have used you as a channel for saving more lives. And I think that's an important, of course he uses it as a teaching moment, but it's important to point out because I think there are times in this spiritual existence when we come to it, we think, oh, I'm just going to sit here and pray and wait. And prayer or patience is not a passive thing. It's incredibly active. Sometimes even exhaustingly so, and that's when we realize we need the prayer of the light touch. But yeah, it's it's not so much that God gives, it's that God moves through you. Of myself I can't do it, but God through me does. It's the Father within that doeth the works, but we have to be the willing vessel. I know that for me, my prayer often, if not daily, but often is, use me as a channel of your good. And this lesson particularly resonates with me today because I was reading something else in my earlier readings from my earlier work today, that do what is on your heart, do what you are guided to do, give of your gifts, your talents, and your treasure, where you are guided to do them, as you are guided to do them, trusting that your Father will reward you what you need. So it's not that when I give a gift to that person, I expect that person to return the gift to me. The fact that I was acting of my heart's desire and I bless that person, God will likewise bless me using some other channel of his choosing. So we need to be active. We pray, yes, but we also act in faith, knowing that God will move through us to affect a greater and better outcome. I think that might be just enough for today. We will come back next week and pick it up with the reading from chapter 47. Oh my goodness, to say that I love you isn't even enough. But I say it anyway. Until next week. Bye then.